Hey there, my fellow support enjoyer. I see you. If you clicked on this video, you may be new to the game and might be interested in playing a more supportive role that includes healing, barriering allies to shield them, granting boons to allies, and overall playing for your friends so they can carry in the damage department. Years ago, the healing or supportive role was not the most accessible or rewarding playstyle, but ever since the first expansion of Heart of Thorns, support players have become crucial to the success of any raid, PvP match, or dungeon group. I'll be guiding you through all the classes, talking about the most support-focused build, and touching on the general themes of the role. First and foremost, let's talk about the classes that have access to a reliable and fleshed out healer/support specialization. Every class except the Warrior and Mesmer have access to a specialization that positions them strongly into the healing role. Warrior and Mesmer have access to utility and minor supportive features, but when compared to all the other professions, they lack consistent healing throughput and overall focus. Hopefully, Warrior and Mesmer will gain an elite specialization in the future that opens up these classes to this role to a more proper degree. Now for the other classes, support and healing elements are all on the base class to a certain extent, but we find the most healing when looking towards the elite specializations. And for the sake of this video, we'll be talking about each class under the context of their elite specialization, really focusing on the builds that offer easy access and ample access to this role. Let's begin with the light armor caster classes. We have the Elementalist. The Elementalist is able to shine as a healer through the use of their water attunement, water specialization, and the Tempest elite specialization. Core Elementalist makes a perfectly okay healer, but if you're looking to fill a spot in a raid or a fractal, the Tempest is what you'll need. Playing as a Tempest will see the Elementalist become a strong, mid to close range healer who is able to provide life-saving heals, buffs in the form of rebound, and hit the standard of the Alacrity boon by taking a Grandmaster trait. The healing can be very engaging and requires constant understanding of movement and positioning. However, the core boon of Alacrity, which is what most supports need, is built into the class in a very unfortunate way. You have to take a trait that competes with your go-to healing trait, and the Alacrity is only granted upon completing an attunement overload. This creates a very boring gameplay loop of always swapping attunements to use the long cast time overloads, regardless of your situation. If you're in water, you'll still use the overload even if allies are not damaged, just to get the Alacrity. A note to point out and suggest for the Elementalist is I just wish that the Alacrity boon was implemented in more areas of the class to make the experience more organic. Alacrity could be put in areas such as the Warhorn, baseline on the water overload, the rebound elite shout, and maybe in some other traits for the Tempest. Overall, I'd give the Elementalist, and by extension the Tempest, a solid 8 out of 10 for the power of its healing, movement-oriented gameplay, and the utility it brings with its unique aura sharing. The Necromancer. The Necromancer is a practitioner of the dark arts, and it perhaps is expected of them to be more selfish, but through its blood magic lines, and with the elite specialization of the Scourge, Necromancers can become strong, proactive supports. The Scourge tackles support and healing through a different lens. They prioritize barrier application rather than raw healing. Barrier healers look to prevent damage by granting allies shields, and rewarding players for knowing the ins and outs of boss encounters. Scourges summon sandshades, acting as locations for allies to gain beneficial effects, and for enemies to be tormented. These sandshades replace the normal death shroud, so Scourges should be more cautious about being overwhelmed by foes and damage in general. In the event that barrier does not offer all that is needed, Necromancers have a few elements of healing through keeping regen up on allies, placing down the wells of blood, or transfusing allies with health through the blood magic trait, Transfusion. Transfusion also carves out a position for the Necromancer to be the most effective reviver in game, being able to pull 5 down allies to you while reviving them in increments. Scourge is differentiated from other Necromancers, offering a really cool support, but if we are giving a review, it does lack an integral element that is needed of healers in a group situation. this being the boon Alacrity. If you're looking to fill a group, they often look for a healer that provides Alacrity, as that is the most common boon healers will supply to the group, and Scourge can't do that. While the barrier is nice, it can be tricky to time properly, and you might not get any value out of it. The res potential is fairly strong, but you'd ideally not want players to go down to begin with. Well, the more they're down, the less damage they're doing. The healing is more sparse than other healers, and you don't apply Alacrity. So while there was a time where we looked at Scourges as being extremely strong, and don't get me wrong, their resurrection potential is still great and can save a whole squad if the timing is right and the conditions are met. But while Scourge can offer some niche clutch moments, I'd have to give it a rating of a 6.5 out of 10, given the modern direction of healers. It does need some Alacrity to bring it up to more modern standards. Moving on over to the medium armors, we have the Thief. The Thief was a profession I always wondered about, like how would a support spec work? And in End of Dragons, my questions were answered in the form of the Spectre. Thieves can spec into the Spectre to become a consistent support. The Spectre was the first class to gain the feature of single target or ally target skills, and they provide this support in the form of Barrier, very similar to Scourge. Spectres are great healers when paired with a few other allies they can target between, as they can maintain consistent application of Barrier with their Scepter. Spectres are also able to cover area damage by using their wells to heal allies and grant them boons. Speaking of boons, Spectres do have access to Alacrity in the form of a trait, which allows them to comfortably fill the healer role. In similar ways to Tempest, the Spectre only gains Alacrity by taking one trait, and pushes them into a gameplay loop of spamming their wells. As I mentioned with the Tempest, this is not a masterful design, and reduces an entire utility type to just the boon it can provide. Nevertheless, it's still providing the boon, which is a major plus. While Spectre excels at ally target healing and rezzing, the group healing comes through various trait selections and focuses on continuous shadow stepping. So if you like that movement-oriented gameplay, the Spectre might be for you. Overall, I'd rank Spectre at a similar 8 out of 10 with its unique direction, Alacrity access, and the ability to deal damage by barriering allies. Moving over to the Ranger. Rangers were the first class to really see the role of healer flourish with their first elite specialization, the Druid. And with recent changes and additions, Druids are very strong, reliable, and dynamic healers that provide the key boon of Alacrity. The Druid staff can now target on allies and uses their healing abilities on particular targets. Though, I must admit these ally target abilities are rather weak and often feel more useful when used on enemies. Nevertheless, the change is a welcomed one and might be a hint at more to come. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. The bulk of the healing comes in the form of the Celestial Avatar, the new profession mechanic when playing a Druid. All of your spells, while as an avatar, provide healing to allies, with your 5th ability providing a bit of damage and crowd control against enemies. Druids will have to keep track of where allies are positioned to target them for ally target skills or to position healing blossoms on them for burst healing. The Druid excels with its burst potential while in Celestial Avatar, so they can turn the tides for your allies in very sticky situations. Druids are also able to provide Alacrity due to a general change for Ranger, a trait in nature magic that allows spirits to grant Alacrity. But, once again, however, the method of Alacrity application is to spam your spirits off cooldown, and requires you to usually take a full utility bar of spirits if you really want to make sure you meet the requirement. Another rough implementation of a very powerful and mandatory boon, where the boon trumps any other effects that the skill provides. With this said, I would rate the Druid at a solid 9 out of 10. If you enjoy a class that has consistent healing application, offers a powerful mode with burst healing, and can provide Alacrity to the group, the Druid is just for you. Engineers are able to take the lead in the healing support playstyle by speccing into the Mechanist. Now, Mechanists are some of the best supports you can take into a group right now, and it was built with so many quality of life features that it's a great spec to play for any new support player. The mech pet is altered through the traits, and the middle line allows you to play an effective support role that shares out alacrity and many other boons while increasing your utility and the utility of your group. With your pet traits and while taking the medkit heal skill, the Mechanist has consistent output of both barrier and healing, allowing you to negate some of the damage coming through while also quickly healing allies for the damage that they've already taken. The alacrity application is finally one that is intuitive and organic to the gameplay and isn't just about spamming one set of skills and nothing else, so that is a huge plus. The one downside, or rather tricky element, is the mech itself. The mech can be difficult to predict where it will go, and you have to keep track of it, and most of the effects play around the mech. One way to get around this and its positional requirements is to take Shift Signet to quickly move the mech around, or just by recalling the mech. My rating for the Mechanist is a solid 10 out of 10, the peak of intuitive support gameplay, feeling like you can respond to mechanics without being snuffed, and perhaps a bit of a bloated toolkit, in good ways and bad ways. Let's head on over to the heavy, and we are going over to Guardian, my main. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about Guardian, but I'm trying to keep this simple, okay? Guardians are baseline experts of support with their wide access to boons and modest healing output, but slotting into the Firebrand takes them to another level. And funnily enough, the Firebrand and Revenant, which we'll get to next, both heavy armor classes, have their support/healing role not granting alacrity, but instead quickness, which probably isn't great design for, consistency and building systems and encounters, but nevertheless, it's what we got. Without further ado, the Firebrand is a lore master which has access to all 3 tomes, allowing the Firebrand to tackle literally any situation. Much like the Mechanist, the Firebrand's kit is heavily loaded and doesn't skimp on any aspect of combat. This, in turn, creates a very strong class, and I mention this with great praise and great critique. For healing, the Firebrand's second tome, Tome of Resolve, is the burst healing kit with around a 50-second cooldown. This kit offers incredible buffs and insane healing output, but once you've used it, you have to wait quite a while to get back into your healing kit. While not in a tome, you must weave in multiple weapon skills and utility skills to upkeep healing. The Firebrand's mantras are also amazing utility skills, as they're all instant cast abilities. And personally, I find this to be so boring. And that is my major criticism of the spec. While it's extremely powerful and offers organic access to quickness, it's very flat in the way you play this class. The tomes all follow the same spell format of cone, AoE around you, targeted AoE, big AoE around you, and even bigger AoE around you. The mantras are also just Tome 1 cone abilities that are instant cast and need no thought process to get use out of them. The playstyle never really changes when playing a Firebrand, and you just spam out all of your abilities in quick succession while you have quickness, which happens to be the direct opposite of its in-game description of the spec. When I read the in-game description of the tomes, I nearly fell out of my chair. It reads, each tome contains raw, powerful magic and must be used with patience and care. Patience and care where? I have never seen patience and care with a Firebrand. You just spam 54111 and you're out. It's an interesting direction that does not really fit with the in-game description. And now, with all of this said, what would I give the Guardian and, by extension, the Firebrand? I would have to give it still a 9 out of 10, with the 1 point missing purely for the gameplay critique. I want to mention it is a little bit more subjective, but when you look at the potential that Guild Wars 2's combat system brings, with other supports being so much more engaging with different abilities and actual customization that you have to decide on, I have to dock a point for this, if I'm being objective. It's just not at the level that I expect for class design, especially for an elite spec. Now, Revenant. The Revenant is a beautiful class to play if you are looking to take up the mantle of healer/support, And funnily enough, all 3 of its elite specs offer a healing playstyle in various formats. One of the core legends, Ventari, the legendary centaur, is the go-to healing legend available to every Revenant. Ventari offers huge healing potential and used to meet the requirement of alacrity, but it was removed, which I hold to harsh criticism and I view as a huge mistake. Nevertheless, Ventari will always be a crucial part of any healing Revenant with its healing, cleansing, and projectile destruction. Let's talk about its first elite spec, the Herald. The Herald is the first elite spec given to the Revenant and is one that is most positioned as a traditional healer/support, but was given the quickness boon. Very interesting decision. The Herald channels the prophetic dragon Glint and has its kit using multiple upkeep skills and boon sharing abilities. Many of its traits slant this spec into a healer/tank role, so it would be fitting and expected for it to get the alacrity boon, as it's not the most aggressively structured. Now, of course, you can build it aggressively, but the themes more strongly tie into a support department. And you know I gotta mention it, the addition of quickness with the recent update also created a really boring gameplay loop that has you camping in Glint and spamming the ability. Yeah, it's just another lackluster design implementation. But overall, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Now the Renegade is a much more offensive-focused spec with the legend of Kala Scorchraiser, but it gets the boon alacrity and not quickness. Do you see where I'm a little confused with the design of like which role gets which boon? Is it just me? Fuck. Oh, it scared me so much. But nevertheless, playing Inventory, and if you camp Inventory with the Renegade equipped, you will be able to fulfill the most expected, the standard for a healer. You'll be able to feel that heal alacrity role, which is what you just tend to see more often when you look at the number of healers that apply alacrity. So likewise, this is an 8 out of 10 for me. Now finally, the Vindicator. The Vindicator allows you to channel the dual legend of Archimedes and St. Victor, with St. Victor being your healing mode. Weirdly enough, Vindicators do not get access to either quickness or alacrity, when they clearly could get it with their Grandmaster traits, and this might be the only time I vouch for putting these key boons strictly on traits. So, until these elements are addressed, Vindicator healers fall down to the bottom, as they don't even touch the utility of Scourge/Necromancer can bring, because Scourges don't bring alacrity either, but they bring a lot of unique utility, and they got a 6.5. Now, for Vindicator healers, I gotta give it a 5 out of 10. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to this man. They have decent healing and barrier, but that's it. It fills the very basic form of healing and barrier, but when you're looking to play a support in Guild Wars 2, you're looking to do other things as well, and primarily provide the key boon of alacrity, vigor, protection, stability, these other facets to gameplay, so it's just a little lacking. And that is my whole rundown of all of the healing supports in Guild Wars 2. This was maybe a much requested video at one time, but maybe it might not be. So I hope you enjoyed if you watched this part. I really love supports in Guild Wars 2. I think it's so much fun to heal. I've been really in my healing bag of recent, playing a lot of Druid, playing a lot of Tempest. They are very fun, active healers, and I just wish that there were some other specializations, such as the Firebrand, that had a little bit more nuance to it, that had a little bit more of an engaging mechanic, because I am a Guardian main, so I would like to play my main more often with more joy, but it's still very strong, and you will have a lot of freedom with the build customization of Guild Wars 2, so you don't have to go with the cookie cutter basic build, but I wanted to just tackle these because it's probably the most applicable to group content and just playing in a way that will see you have a lot of effect for a group. Thank you all for coming. Like the video if you liked it. Comment below your thoughts about all of the specializations and all of the classes that are supports. And and I would love to have some conversations about perhaps future design with Warrior and Mesmer. If you'd like to support the channel, head on over to Patreon where you get early access to all these videos. We might do individual deep dives on all of these professions, and if you'd like to catch me over on Twitch, I stream every day of the week playing some Guild Wars 2 and perhaps some other games, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye everyone! Mwah!